Try different wines.
Okay. What's your favorite wine? Red or white? Hold on, first.
Red.
Okay, all right.
I'm sophisticated.
I think a part of me was just like, y'all, we've been great. You're just now figuring it out, but we've been great. That's who we are. It's in our DNA.
To like do my Colossal Deadpool like impersonation, 1 or 2 moments, right? It's
And I'm sitting here in my head going, I wonder if I can somehow sniff the traffic going from the armband. It's got to be talking to an API or something.
to the next cocktail, to the next conversation.
Yo, what up, C3 Squad? Welcome back to another conversation, another episode of Cocktails, Culture, and Conversations. It's your boy, David Lee, here with my best buddies, kind of. Maybe one of them. Nah, both of them. Y'all know
So you have to throw that in there.
Hey, look, they don't
It
know.
depends on the day.
See,
Oh, they definitely know.
Now
They
you
definitely
like,
know.
Yeah, no, they don't know. You know what I'm saying? I could have been talking about Laurel, because Maine got this bullshit ass Cowboys hat on, so they didn't know what I was talking about. I'm throwing it out there, but you know what it is, y'all. We back. It's your boy Maine Terrier. It's your girl L Bug here. And we here to jump into a good topic today. Before we get into that, look, we got to tell y'all, make sure y'all locked in. Subscribe to ebonyascent.com. Hit us up, all the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Ebony Ascent on TikTok. We are on the Corner Media Group. Let us know what your favorite episode is, what your favorite topics are. Hit us up, engage with us. We love to hear from y'all. And with that, we are going to roll right into this week's episode. We got another big topic we're going to talk about, and it's been a nice theme of topics. If you've been rolling with us, so those C3 Squad members, we appreciate y'all. We see y'all. There's going to be a test at the end. But today's topic, we're talking about reparations. It is going to be a test. I'm just kidding.
Don't say that.
But we're talking about reparations, right? And specifically, what we want to have this context be about is we're not even going to argue about or debate whether or not reparations is needed. We ain't even do that. We all know it's needed. But let's talk about what does that look like, right? And specifically, when I think about it, what does reparations look like today, right? If we look at 40 acres and a mule, which is what most people go back to, which was supposed to be given to us as a people, what does that look like today? What is the equivalent of 40 acres and a mule? So we're going to kick it off. Elba, lead us off. Reparations, how do we get it done? What does that look like? What is it?
So reparations, right, by definition, would be like the monetary payback, maybe money, it could be land, it could be different things, but giving somebody something for the harm that you caused them, essentially. So after the Civil War, right, we had Jim Crow come into place and all of these different things after, but right in between, there was a little tiny piece where you had former Union generals and different things like that who went back to the little cozy spots in, Washington, and they were deciding on these new amendments, they're called the Reconstruction Amendments, and so on and so forth. And one of these individuals proposed 40 acres in them. So it's quite literally what it sounds like, right? That all African-American people would receive 40 acres of land and a mule or some sort of transportation so that they can go back to doing what they've only known really to do, which is farming, agriculture. And that would be a great way to segue them into being productive United States citizens. So 40 acres and a mule really got shot down because people realized very quickly, and David speaks really well about this, so I want to transition it to you, pass it right back. It got shot down very quickly because American capitalism and really all of these structures that we talk about, the construction of whiteness, race, all of these things are all embedded in capitalism, right? And that is all kind of on top of land, right? So land ownership and who has what. And so essentially I'm not sure exactly who the person was that had their little racist aha moment. They were like, if we give all these Black folks all of this land, we're not going to be able to oppress them. We're not going to be able to keep rolling things the way that we've kept them rolling. That's probably not a good idea. And while they were in the North and, the people governing, they were still racist. I just mentioned that because, again, when we talk about these things, history always paints this picture of the North being liberal and forward thinking and non-racist, and they weren't. They were just as racist as the South. They just had different ways of expressing their racism and oppressing people of color. So that's what 40 the mule was. And to this day, again, so that was shut down. You had Jim Crow, all of these things. So where we were originally talking about, we meaning the government after, post Reconstruction, we were talking about how African-American people are going to live in this country, how they'll make their money, so on and so forth. That quickly got shot down. And the conversation then became, how can we oppress them and keep them in some kind of state of slavery, no matter what that looks like?
And before you give us your take on it, David, I just wanted to answer who it was who had their aha moment. And it was President Andrew Johnson, who basically reversed field on President Lincoln
Jackson?
emancipation. Yeah, Andrew Johnson.
Johnson.
Yeah, Andrew Johnson. And he is the one who started to usher in the whole Jim Crow culture nationally, because it kind of started in the South. It got traction in the South, but Andrew Johnson was the president that instituted a federal culture.
Yeah, and so look, when you, I promise I won't completely financially nerd out on y'all, but just a little bit, right? Because what was really important about that, especially at the time, so 40 acres, right? At that point in time. So capitalism is based off the society of a free market, right? Where anybody can kind of come in and you have an asset, a service that you can provide into this market, and supply and demand drives what those services are, right? I've said it before, right? It's easy to win a race when you're the only one in it, right? So you come from this economy that was growing, that up until this point, there was no competition really from any other outside source, right? And so you had the white landowners, and they were, growing tobacco, cotton, all these things or whatever, right? And so they had their prices they negotiated with. So they had their, free market economy that was going. So then if you say, all right, what's the biggest producer at this time, right? It's agriculture, which is based off the land, right? You get acres of land and you can produce, and the farmers, y'all can come in and comments on, I should know a little bit more of this, but I don't. But like based on the acreage of land, like what you can produce, you can put cotton over there, you can put beans over there, you can put different things and keep rotating that throughout the seasons. And so that's going to create, basically income for you, but also your ability to trade and give you a source of income. So now that land, because it is a income generating asset. So not only does the land then appreciate, but what you're getting out of the land is now services and goods that you can then go forth and sell. So that's the equivalent of like looking at this day, like owning 4 or 5 businesses, right? So equate like an acre of land to an actual business that you own. So right now, if I tell you, I'm going to give you 40 businesses that you now have and can run and operate, that's a whole lot of economic power that's coming your way. So yes, they looked at that and was like, whoa, hold up, like 40 acres? Like, nah, we ain't gonna do that, because now all of a sudden, what does that do? That brings more people into this free trade economy, right? And then look, let's be honest, people, there's no regulation on prices. It's supply and demand, and yesterday's price is not today's price. So you can damn near bet that if I've got barrels of hay and Laurel has cows, right? I need to get some meat from her. She needs to get some hay, right? We're gonna be like, okay, cool. Maybe I say the price is, all right, Laurel, I'll give you 3 bushels of hay, you give me a cow, right? Because me and Laurel cool. That's El Boogie, that's Little Sister, we cool. So that's the lower price. And then somebody else come across, I can be like, well, I don't like the way you're looking at me. It's gonna be 7 bushels of hay, right? You know what I mean? Like, and we can assume, right? In fact, that we kind of know that all of these kind of business owners had deals between each other. Now all of a sudden we come to the table, because we got 40 acres in the mule. So I can come in and say, well, oh, you want to go buy the cows from over here and it costs you 5, but I'll give it to you for 3. Or matter of fact, what I do is for the people that look like me, who I go to Maine and I go over to his 40 acres, and me and Maine say, yo, man, just give me a bushel, you give me a cow. You know what I'm saying? Like 1 for 1. And we do that. Now all of a sudden, what's happening? We're creating ecosystems amongst ourselves, right? We partner together and say, man, I'm gonna just do straight 40 acres of cotton. You do 40 acres of tobacco. Together, me and you, like all of a sudden we got 80 acres we can provide to an entire community. Again, that's raising assets. Like, so that's what that meant. And so if you take it forward to kind of give people an example of what that is today, right? It's not a quite equal example, but just think about that 40 different businesses. If I were to walk to you right now and just give you 40 businesses, right? You can have a grocery store, you can have a drugstore, you can have an electronics store, whatever it is, I give you 40 businesses. Like, that is power that you are going to have both economically to feed for yourself, but the effect that you can now have on your community, right? Now, all of a sudden, you get to drive, prices, especially let's take 40 businesses and you kept them all in the same city, right? Everybody think about your city, wherever you're at. I'm in Atlanta. If I own 40 businesses in Atlanta, I own 40 fucking 7-Elevens. You don't think I'm gonna be able to change the gas price a little bit? make it easy for y'all that drive, gas powered vehicles. I don't think I may be able to, and then like maybe I'll have some snacks in there. It's like, okay, maybe I bring this down a little bit. Like I now have that leverage to start to drive in this capitalistic society that we're in, which I would agree capitalism isn't bad, greedy capitalism is. But now I'm in there and I've got this free market system that I'm now controlling because I control a lot of the supply. Therefore, I can manipulate and adjust the demand, right? And so that's something that is crucial for me when I look at this and all the things of what reparations would mean now, right? And land to itself to this day has still been one of the most fundamental ways for building wealth with American society. And the reason for that, again, is because you have something that appreciates in value from the time that you bought it. And it's something that you can turn and generate into income. So anytime you have an asset that both itself becomes more valuable and kind of creates income, that's a double whammy. Now you're getting into passive, right? So if you can collect more of those things, right? In the name of the game, if you like playing Monopoly, is to collect as many assets as you can that then generate value, that then generate income, right? And that's always been able to start at minimum with land. For the average American, it's land. You get a house, you buy it, pay down a mortgage, it appreciates in value. You can borrow off that, you can sell it, you can do more things, right? And that gives you so much more of a step up over things, right? So it is still one of those biggest things why land is so valuable. Now it's more so what you can do with the land. Back then it was just the land itself would just turn around and produce because we were farmers much more than we are now. Go ahead, man.
And that's what actually shot down the whole notion of the 40 acres and a mule, is that President Andrew Johnson, I want you guys to keep that name in the back of your mind, President Andrew Johnson and his advisors in the Democratic Nationalist Party. So yes, it was the Democrats back then who realized how valuable that land and property ownership was. And they were like, you know what? I think that these former slave owners and former land owners who had their slaves emancipated are missing out on this opportunity. So they are the ones who deserve and who have the inherent right to the 40 acres. And so that's why they've reversed the whole decision on Lincoln's emancipation. That is in itself, the idea that land is valuable and will appreciate and will generate wealth. That is why the 40 acres and the mule, the reparations, was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So are we all saying that we think reparations for Black folks begins with land? What are your thoughts? Where does it begin?
Yeah.
Because so what's being discussed now, just to bring a little bit more context into it, right? There's this bill, there's a commission, a judiciary committee that's been created that is trying to get a bill passed. It's called HR 40. That would, when the bill's passed, it would create a commission who would study and research the history of Blackness, Black people in America, right? The constructs of race, the social construct of race from 1619 all the way until present, to really identify exactly what this committee believes. And I'm sure there would be different surveys, I would hope, that they would reach out to the greater population that would be taken to determine what they believe African American people are owed by the US government. So that bill, HR 40, hasn't been brought to vote. Right. So it hasn't been passed. We're all kind of sitting on it right now. Folks are sitting on their hands because, student debt and all of these other things that are placed more highly right now, which is another debate for what's really the most important thing for our government to be concerned with. But does it begin with land? Does it begin with the return of land that we toiled and slaved over?
So, and here's, I fundamentally, yes, but I this kind of goes back to a conversation that we had in the previous podcast. I look at this, Maine, when you had talked about like we need to change the way our message so it comes across the right way. Like, ideally, if I looked at it, I would say, yes, it starts with land, right? Let's start back there. Let's just give everybody some land. I don't know, and this is, I'll always, say when I don't know something, I don't know how much like kind of free land is left, right? Like, so. And when we look at the numbers, like I don't know if there would be enough to kind of give everybody without having to go forth and say, all right, then we'll go back and annex it and take it back and then go back and give to it. Which, the vindictive petty side of me is like, well then fuck it, let's do it. Shit, I don't care. Let's do it. But just thinking that out, then what comes with that, right? Like then so I'm like, what's the likely path of kind of getting something, right? If we said we're going to go back and say let's give everybody land, and that means we got to go back, take land from others, I'm with it. But how likely is it that that's going to actually even pass? And then beyond that, how much conflict would that arise to come from, right? So then I take it, then I go into it. I'm like, all right, cool. But let's kind of back to what I said, like the land was so important back then because we were so heavily based on agriculture. Not so much we are now, right? So while as we still need, some access of land, some access to real estate, I think it's kind of I would look at it as a combination. I would go back to businesses, right? And I would look at something like, okay, what we'll state is we have opportunity that they passed, and this came out of the Obama administration, right? In which opportunity zones are areas that are select areas where investors can invest in, and basically you kind of get a capital gains, tax haven for a number of years. And the whole point was to get investors to go back and invest in other communities that weren't kind of getting that investment, right? And so what I kind of take it to is, okay, there's probably not enough land for everybody, but what we can kind of give to everybody is businesses. And I look at communities, right? And I just say, look, I would give each African American, let's call it 5. I'd give them. I'd pass it to where there's in a city, like there's 5 businesses that are Black owned, and I would get a drugstore, whatever it is. You own 5 businesses, is there for you in that community, and I would get rid of business taxes for 10 years. So you get businesses, and it's tax free for 10 years, because that to me gives you the economic feasibility to actually start growing and accumulating and doing something both within your community, for you for the wealth, and then taking advantage and giving a 10-year runway to get that business up and running. You're not, dealing with the taxes. You can go and create all that and then put that money back into the community. Now you've truly kind of given people a step up in their community to kind of have, again, that economic feasibility and power to say, all right, well, again, if everybody's got these 5 businesses, we have a lot of business community, that money's coming back to the Black community, that raises the dollars that are going in there. I would probably whether I do federal tax or state tax, I would look at. Specifically, I would probably favor state tax, just you could drive that to actually make sure that's going back into the community, right? So therefore, you're pouring into the community that you own, that you have these businesses, that money that's coming back and providing for that community. But then we get into the argument of taxes and all this shit or whatever. So whatever. But my point is, give Black people businesses, reduce the tax rates, get rid of the tax rates for 10 years on the business taxes. And now you have a 10-year runway to go and build actual equity, right? And if we gave every single African American that, like, even that, like I'm seeing the Fox News outrage at that when it came across because of what that means. But if we look at it, that's what we're talking about, right? Like that. I don't think there's ever going to be anything that equates to like, here, this is equal to what we did with you for the past damn near 500 years. No, nothing, right? So like, but something around that, to me, like that truly does give a step up. And it's like, okay, now like our people have the ability to, at minimum, control the resources and invest in the resources for us and our communities. That's at the very minimum, right? Now with that, if I've got a town of, I'm gonna just use small numbers, 100 Black people, right? That's 500 businesses, right? How much money as facts, we spend $1.6 trillion, Black people in this country, right? So I take a small portion of that, localize it to a small community, like our schools are gonna be better, right? Our resources that we give to those schools are going to be better. The roads are going to be better. The things that we can provide, for the rest of that community, like whatever we want to do is safeguards to protect our city, right? Whether you want to have your own police force or not, whatever it is, but you now have the financial power to make that for your community, right? And that, to me, like that's where I would take it. No one getting goddamn well, we probably get like half of that, but that's where I would start.
We ain't even getting half of that, man. You already, because so first of all, like, you're a very business-minded individual. So the obvious thought for you is, hey, let's give everybody businesses and the community will thrive. I see that as an absolute disaster. I think I think it's a great idea, right? I think it's a great idea, but not everybody's business minded. So you give a Black person 5 businesses, how many of those per person are going to be failed businesses at the end of like 2 years? You know, even with the tax breaks or whatever, within 2 years, I mean, people who are very business savvy, very business oriented, still the majority of them have failed businesses. So
Yeah.
imagine just giving people with no idea how to run a business, no idea how to manage a drugstore or a grocery store or whatever, no idea how to manage inventory, no idea how to budget, no idea how to manage overhead, how to move their capital and reinvest their revenue back into the business. And you just give them 5, not just 1, but 5 businesses. I see it being an absolute disaster. And in 2 years, you know, the other side is won, because they're going to be the ones that are snatching up those foreclosed businesses. They're going to be thriving and running shit in our communities in 2 to 5 years. You know what I mean? And then where are you going to put all those businesses, right? Already we know land is at a premium, and you're giving, what are we at? Like, I don't know, 17 million people. So we're talking 17 million times 5 businesses all over the country, relatively in a short period of time. I just don't see that in particular working. Not that it's a bad idea, not that it's not owed to us, because it is, but I just don't see the feasibility of how that would work.
I will look. I agree in the feasibility that there's a lot that needs to go. So I don't disagree with any of that. That there is a cost to own and operating a business. The one counterpoint I will say is, bro, we run and operate and are operating a business right now, which doesn't require any land, right? We're in the world where you can start a business. You don't have to, kind of have office space. But yes, so look, you're absolutely right. There's a whole lot that would need to be done. Not everybody's meant to run a business. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. But I would also argue it's the same thing for land, right? You got to know how to take care of land. You got to know how to farm. You got to know how to do something with the land. So that's like those same things would apply, right? There is going to be some kind of like, what do you do with this thing now? Like, how do you turn this into something that's there, right? If you go back then, like, Laurel made the statement, like the 40 acres kind of made, because that's all Black people are, that's all they knew how to do at that point, right? Like, that's all they had been doing. So it's like, okay, they would at least know like what to do with the land. But I would argue even then they weren't going to know like the taxes and how to take care of that. And of course the taxes weren't going to be fair, but whatever. But my point is, no matter what we do, I think, right, my opinion, no matter what we do in the reparations, yes, what I said, I knew that it was, I know that it's kind of like, yeah, they would never give us that. But like in negotiation, that's where I'm starting. Like, you ask me what the price is, I'm gonna tell you the price is, here's the price. And you go, okay, I can't, okay, well then let's figure out what you can do. Like, if we don't, whatever this is, we need to come for it all, knowing that it's going to be, we got to come
down. Yeah,
right.
It's gonna be
You know what I mean? So,
yeah, and my argument regarding the land is, at least with the land, even if you do absolutely nothing with it, it's still going to appreciate, because other people are going to be doing stuff with their land and making your land more valuable. And you also have the ability to say, all right, I have 40 acres. I'll sell off, 5 acres here. I'll sell off 5 acres there. And you can flip that for liquid capital. So even if you do absolutely nothing with land, it still holds value. If you do absolutely nothing with your business, not only has it lost value, but somebody's going to snatch that shit out from under you. You know what I mean? So, and like I said, I think it's a great start. Like, if you had started your pitch with saying, this is where we want to start. We want to start with giving every Black person 5 businesses, and then saying, all right, so now what can we whittle down from that to get to, what can every Black person theoretically manage? I'm with you. Yeah, let's give everybody 5 businesses and the land that those 5 businesses sit on and the capital to actually run and start and operate those businesses. Yeah, let's make that a start for every Black person. And see how they bastardize that shit, and we end up with freaking just the mule.
Yeah, and Maine, that's a good point that you brought up, right? Because we know America has tried this before. So the conversation about reparations is not one that's new. Maybe on a macro level, right, where now we're talking about HR 40, all African Americans who are descendants of slaves would benefit from this. But America's given out reparations before, right, to indigenous people. They've given out reparations to people that were affected by Japanese internment camps during World War II, people who were victims of forced sterilization, African Americans explicitly who were victims of forced sterilization. There was a case in Chicago where a group of African American men who were just targeted and brutalized by the police, those folks were given reparations. Now, what happened with all of that, right, is that these commissions were formed. They came up with a number, 5 million, 23 million, whatever the number was. And that information's out there. I encourage y'all the viewers to go do your homework on that. But whatever the number was that was created, we're going to give it to these people. Then came the loopholes. Oh, well, it's only if you're a member of a federally recognized indigenous tribe. Well, it's only if you were, living in the city of Chicago in between this time period and this time period. Not if you were affected by police violence in general in Chicago, just this specific time frame, right? The government always finds a way to, throw us a bone, but then be like, no, like keep coming, because we're not just going to give it to you easily. And that's exactly what happened in all of those situations that I just, briefly summarized. Like the people who were promised these reparations were not given even the full amount that they were promised because of some loophole that came in, or some, again, the whole commission just failed in and of itself. So do we believe that is something that would history not repeat itself again in this situation? Because another thing that I'm hearing with what both of you are saying also is that, like what I just said, like the government is always going to find a way. So say they gave us all those businesses or something. Well, then they'll probably say, well, we're going to give businesses to African-American people who have a history of entrepreneurship, or those who have a bachelor's degree in it, or something like that. Then that leaves out a whole giant slew of people who have never done, who have never been entrepreneurs, or did not study business and economics in college, or didn't even go to college, right? I wouldn't count that out, that they'll do something like that, because they're not just going to give us everything. Because again, the whole structure of the country would fail. I mean, if Black people had fluid dollars in our community, and we were able to support ourselves, and we had the economy, we had the law, we had what really is owed to us, which again to different people. And that's why I don't mean to make it go around like, okay, boys and girls, let's talk about reparations. What do you think? No, but we're each coming from different backgrounds. Like David's very business minded. David's an engineer. David's a Black man. Maine's a Black man. Maine's in the military. I'm a Black woman, right? And I'm an educator. So we all have different ideas of what reparations would look like based on our own, personal opinions, based on who we are. So, what are your thoughts? So what would that really look like? We can talk about what we think we should get. What do we really think based on all that we know about the history of racism and the history of reparations that have already been in place here? What do we think would actually happen when HR 40 passes and they come up with a plan?
What do I think would actually happen, or what do I think should happen?
What do you think would actually happen? Would reparations even happen in general? Would that even happen, or would it just be a conversation that continues to happen and there's all these bills that don't get passed or voted on, and that's just, but we're talking about it. So be happy, Black folks. At least we're talking about it, but no action, right?
I think that's what would really happen. Is there's going to be a lot of talking, a lot of bills that get proposed and get shot down for one reason or another. Maybe when the dust settles, there'll be a little bit of financial compensation to everyone. You know what I mean? Maybe. I think that is as far as this country will go. What I think should happen is definitely the financial compensation. I don't know how much, right? But I think there should be a substantial financial compensation and seats on community or state or federal boards that control where our finances go and how our finances are utilized. I think that's what should happen. And if you have this financial compensation, the people who are educators can spend their money on education, on enrichment. The people who are business owners or business minded can spend their money on establishing businesses and cultivating economic growth in their communities. And the people who are agricultural minded can start working on cultivating land and providing food and meat and produce and stuff for their communities. So I think if we look at a financial compensation and then real political power, real representation at the tables where decisions are made on how our funding or how our funds are used, I think that is what reparations should be. And I honestly don't think that just financial compensation is enough, because what what would happen there is the people who are not business minded, who are not politically minded, who are not education minded, who are not agricultural minded, they're just going to take that money, blow it, and it's going to get funneled back into the economy and benefit the people who've been oppressing us for 500 years. You know what I mean? So I think you got to have the right people in positions where they make decisions on how our finances are used.
All right, we're gonna take a real quick break, and I'm gonna jump in on that. But we'll be right back.
All right, let's take a break and hear about our cocktail of the week, the Sazerac.
Welcome back. Today's cocktail is the original Sazerac. We're going to start by adding a sugar cube to our glass and saturating the sugar cube with about 3 to 5 dashes of bitters. And we're going to break the sugar cube down so it can dissolve easily while we add 2 ounces of Sazerac rye whiskey. This is straight whiskey, so it's about 90% alcohol as to your regular bottles, which carry about 70 to 80%. We're going to mix that and then add 3/4 of an ounce of anise liqueur and stir it all up. Now we're going to go ahead and get an additional glass, which is going to have 1/4 ounce of absinthe. This is just to swizzle around the glass and throw it out. Now we're going to put our mixture into another glass with ice, and we're just going to get a lemon peel. Let's go ahead, get a lemon peel, get those oils, rub it around the rim of the glass, and throw the lemon peel in. And there you have it, y'all, a Sazerac cocktail.
All right, so coming back to this, so what do I think would actually happen? I'm slightly more optimistic than Maine. I think we'll see something. I think it'll be a while, but honestly, I think the thing that we'll get that has, in my mind, that probably has the best route of making it through is going to end up being like some kind of tax credit. Like they're you know what? I was gonna say, like, they're not gonna cut out checks. Damn it, watching what they did with them damn PPP loans, boy, they was quick to so possibly they could cut some checks, but I could see it like, okay, here's a check cut that goes to everybody, and then here's some tax credits, right? That you get for the next kind of like 2 or 3 years. And the reason why, again, I know I'm business finance minded, but I come down to like how the government's financed and how it works, right? And it's going to be extremely contentious and probably damn near impossible to get them to approve a bill to cut out checks in the amount that this thing would need to do. So I can see one of the compromises being, look, we won't, and just use small numbers, right? Like we'll give $100 to every person in 5 years worth of tax credits here, right? Because tax credits are something they can basically kind of finance over time, right? And so it's like, all right, cool. And it's one of those things that it's one of those areas where, I'll be honest, for the financial savvy, right? You'll take a tax credit because there's so many things that you can work with that and do with that and kind of give you those opportunities to do going forward, right? So I think once it's all said and done, it's going to be years of going back and forth, right? There's going to be all kinds of issues. How do we even track everybody, right? How do we know who it is, right? Like, how do we decide like who gets it, who doesn't get it, stuff like that. They'll argue about that there is a real issue, and we're going to have to figure that out and how we come up with that. But once they kind of get through all that, I think at the end it's going to be some kind of stipend and some kind of credit, and that's probably the best that we would get out of it.
Yeah. And I think just in general, like a commission set up to really determine who are the descendants of these individuals. I think that in and of itself could cause a problem. Like, and again, because we've seen this with indigenous folks in this country, right? With the blood quantum laws and different things like that we're only recognizing you if you have so much of this blood, then we'll consider you a member of this tribe, and you'll get, whatever the case may be, depending on tribal law and all that. Yeah. It would be the same thing. But what's interesting to me is, again, those blood quantum laws have also played a role in the Black community. Let's not forget the 1-drop rule, right? So, interesting. So it'd be interesting just to see where the government would try to throw in those loopholes of like, oh, well, technically not. Well, really? Well, technically they are Black, even though they look like this, because you said that if they have a Black mother or a Black grandmother, that made them Black, no matter what color their father was. So now what? right? That would be another interesting piece of this that would, again, make this be something that drags on and on and on. But another interesting piece that I think plays a role here that I want to hear your thoughts on, both of you. When I talk about all of the different reparations that have taken place already in American history, all of the ones that are involving, indigenous groups, Black groups, there was never any acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It's interesting that in my research, I find that with the reparations that were given to Japanese Americans who were forced away from their personal property and they suffered all of these losses during World War II under this racist, ideal that they were all, bad. The government acknowledged that. They cited, racial bias that went into those decisions and apologized. They cited poor government leadership in those decisions and then gave everybody in that community a big check, right? How come when it's indigenous groups, when it's African American groups, non-white, any non-white or non-model minority group, we can't even get the acknowledgement that y'all messed up? That it wasn't okay. We talk about, and I live in New England, right? So Plymouth Rock is a thing. And if you go to Plymouth, they have this rock that supposedly the first pilgrim put his foot on. Okay, but they have Plymouth Rock and they have the Mayflower too that they recreated and all of that. And so there's this really big legacy right there of, people in this country believing that the pilgrims came here and they did all these great things. And no, let's talk about how they came here and they murdered all of these indigenous populations. Let's talk about that intentionally. Let's talk about that. Why is that something that we're never going to acknowledge, that we have never acknowledged? Let's talk about slavery. But instead, what we're seeing right now is this war on, and again, critical race theory, it's and we'll get into this in the future. We're going to have an episode about this. Critical race theory is a graduate level theory. Kids in elementary schools and stuff are not being taught about critical race theory. Republicans who are against this, and even some Democrats who I'm sure are against this as well, they don't understand that. And so really what they're chalking it up to is they don't want Black history being taught in schools, because for people who talk about race, they're racist. Let's stop talking about a racial divide. You keep talking about that. You're the reason why racism perpetuates. Black lady. Someone saying that to me. And I've heard that before. I've been called racist a lot of times because I talk about the history of oppression in this country by white people. So if they're attacking, education and don't even want people to talk about the history of oppression and that slaves were not happy in their station and they were just upset when the masters weren't that nice to them, which is what people are being taught. There are books out there where that's the narrative. There's a book out there about Harriet Tubman's life that literally says that, right? That she had no problem being a slave, but her master was a jerk and she pieced him out. Come on. So how do we even begin to have the conversation about reparations for African American people, indigenous people, when we can't even acknowledge as a country that they've been done this horrible, horrible, horrible wrong from the beginning? First of all,
they 100% know. It's not that they are ignorant of the lessons that would be taught. They are 100% aware that knowledge is power, knowledge is empowering, and ignorance is where they're comfortable with us being, right? They are comfortable with us not knowing the real history. And as we stated on previous episodes of the podcast, the GOP in particular are masters at their public relations, right? They are masters at spinning any narrative to speak directly to their target demographic. And the rest of us are just not, right? We're just not as good. I'm not going to say we're not capable. We're just not as good at honing and targeting our messages to the right people, whereas they are. And that's part of the reason why this discussion doesn't take place, because as I've said before, like we're less than 20% of the population, right? So we have an 80% population gap that we need to overcome just to be equal, just to be seen as equal. So our messaging needs to be better. Our messaging needs to appeal to at least half of that 80% majority, right?
Are you saying, Maine, are you saying our as in the Black community or the Democratic Party?
The Black community. The Black community, because there are those in the Democratic Party that, let's be honest, they're still part of that 80% majority, right? So our, as in the Black community, as Black messaging, as the reparations discussion, as the Black Lives Matter discussion, the police brutality discussion, the redlining and gerrymandering discussion. Like all of these discussions need to be packaged so that they appeal more to at least half of that 80% majority, cisgendered, white, middle class, prominent, all of those. Because even the women in that demographic, they have voting power as well. You know what I mean? So like, we can't just pile it all on cisgender white male prominent dudes, right? Even their wives, their sisters, their mothers, their aunties, their cousins have voting power. They have legislative power. They have political power. They have managerial and business ownership power. Like we have to market our messaging to all of them, right? And hope that it sticks with at least half of them, so that we can play on sort of an even playing field. Because right now we're on a seesaw, right? And that 80% has that seesaw on the ground. So we can't even begin to push up because we're not even on the ground. We're not even on even ground with them. And that's kind of the issue that we have to overcome. And once we get enough people in the right places with the right messaging to begin to have this discussion fruitfully, and we have a start, right? Now, HR 40 is a start, but who's it reaching? Who's it actually appealing to, and who's it talking to, and how much traction is that actually going to get in the legislature? If you need 60% of a vote to pass, but 80% of the people in the room are opposed to it. You know what I'm saying? So,
and it's it's actually, it has to be talked about and discussed in a way that's not like that's constructive, which is going to be difficult with things like this, right? Like right, wrong, or indifferent. Like majority of people don't do something because it's the right thing to do. They just don't, right? So I mean, we can't have that discussion. It's like we should have reparations. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. To Maine's point, 80% of that seesaw gonna sit there like, ain't.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? What does that mean? It's the right thing to do. Okay, cool. But so it's, and again, like this will hit people the wrong way, and to an extent, like it does suck, but it's how you have to play it, right? Like Maine's right, like the message and what we're talking about, right? Like it's this whole thing has to be sold, right? There's got to be a what's in it for me. Anytime you're in any kind of negotiation about anything, right? There's two parties involved. What's in it for the other party? Now, granted, the easiest way is to say, fuck the other party. They don't get nothing. Okay?
Yeah, they ain't voting for that.
Right, right. You can definitely take that stance. I have zero doubt. I mean, that it's going to go. It's just not, right? So it's got to be, okay, like, look, it's going to be these conversations around, all right, here's what we can do to drive, economic empowerment or whatever words or aspects that you want to say that they know that there is something that will, and I think you have to tie it to, this will make our country overall better, right? You can't really tie it to, because if you get to like, hey, like, what's in it for me and what do they get, like that's going to taint the entire thing. It's like, you can't get something out of this, but we've got to tie to hopefully at some instinct, the people who are having this discussion, you signed on to be in the House and in the Senate because there is a greater belief that you have in this overall country. It has to be honestly in discussions of unity, which is hard, right? I am not saying this is easy, okay? Like, but that's going to be hard when you're looking at the person across the street. It's like, I don't really believe that you want unity, but we have to talk about unity. We have to find that one common thing is like, hey, like we all believe that this country can be better. Okay, boom, we have something we agree on. We're all nodding our heads, yes. Okay, well, because of that, if we do this, right, those are the way the conversations has to go. So that way, that to Maine's point, like that pill can be swallowed and people can say, okay, like, yeah, this is something we should do to drive towards a better community, things like that. Because if we go straight towards the thing where it's like, y'all did this and you did this wrong and this and that, like it's hard to have those conversations because then division comes up. And as soon as you have division, people want to take sides. When people take sides, what happens? It's no longer, I'm not hearing you, you're right, you're wrong, I'm right. And now we lost it, right? Mm-hmm. Now we're battling, we're deflecting, we're going against each other. We're no longer talking to come to a compromise. We just drew a line. right? We just drew a fucking line that's like, nah, fuck that. I'm not coming that line. Your line is wrong. And now we're not going to get anywhere. And if anywhere, where it's actually going to get worse, because now we're going to escalate. Now we're going to have conflict, right? And then what does that? We've seen it in history. What does that do? Now the what did dumb fuck call them? Now the Proud Boys are going to come out, right?
Oh, the Proud, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's the shit that it's like. This is where it is. It's nuance to this shit, right? You gotta be able to have these discussions and be able to talk about what's important and passionate and phrase them in a way that we can get to the root of the problem and actually come up with solutions. And it's not easy, right? I don't say that lightly. For somebody that looks at this, no, fuck that, it's this, they should be. I'm with you. I have that same anger, I have that same, but it's not gonna get anywhere, right?
You gotta market that better, because that
Right.
line always favors the side that's in power. And they can be wrong as fuck, but they have the power, so they can continue to keep wrong in place. So yeah, we gotta draw people across that line. We gotta make our benefits so appealing to at least some of the people on that side that they're willing to step across that line and support us on those.
Right. And when they do, so it's like, okay, it's, give a person an inch to take them out. We just got to take our inches where we can. Now we get people drawn over and say, you know what, you got a point. This would be better. This would do better for us as a society if we could unify on these things. And this, okay, cool. Now we got people coming off that seesaw and they're like, nah, I think I want to kind of hang out with them over there. Okay, great. So now to Maine's, but the seesaw starts coming like this a little bit.
It starts to level
now
out.
We're like, okay, we don't need a lot. Now that you're over here, great. And now here's where I always look at this. Now that we get there and we get those things passed, so we get something around reparations passed, right? We work to make sure that, and part of that, we leave loopholes for ourselves. We leave areas where we can go and get something, because whatever it is, right? Making sure that, like, let's say whatever the reparations are, let's make sure that it can be inherited. Like, I'm all about, like, and I know I get this is how I'm built, but I'm all about, like, the taxes and other stuff. Let's take whatever we get from reparations and exempt it from the estate tax. So let's make sure that it can be passed down to a generation, so we can start creating general wealth, and it's not taxed when it's passed down. That's the stuff that I'm like, let's get in and have those conversations. So once we get them to have the conversations, they're willing to have it and start compromising, and we work those things in there and make opportunities again, to get more of us. Once we get them to come over, that's cool. Now y'all came over. Now let's open up the back door and slide in more of us. So now the next time we have this fight, the next something, it's not an 80-20 thing. They look across the line. It's like, wait a minute. Last time we was on the seesaw, it was 4 of y'all. Where did 15 of y'all come from? Oh, don't worry about it. But now let's have this discussion, right? It's chess, not checkers. It always has been, right? And I think that's the one thing that I think we struggle with, because it is such an emotionally driven and powerful thing to talk about for us. And I get it. But if we can't figure out how to aim that, we are a toddler running around with a gun. That's what we are, right? We gotta be able to aim that and say, okay, let's get what we can, and let's talk about, let's get these compromises. Let's make ways for us to get there. I don't know. I'm always optimistic. I think we're gonna get something out of it. It's not gonna be what we want. Like, but it's a start. It's gonna be something. And here's the thing: like, now it's on the books and it's there. So now if we want to come back and do something else, we have something to refer to get and go to build off of, right? That's what I look at when I look at HR 40 and what we can do. I was like, sure, we get what we can, but now we got something to go build on. But it's gonna be rough. I think it's a good 12 years before we see something. But
yeah, I'm not totally convinced, right, that America has a soul to save, right? So I've always been more concerned with
You're an anarchist.
whatever, but I'm more concerned with the advancement of oppressed people, of Black people, of Indigenous people, of Hispanic people, and non-white people who this country was founded upon. That's what I'm concerned about. And can you imagine if all of these groups, African Americans included, but Indigenous people, were actually given their well, that's something to say. I can't even say a fair share, because if that was the case, none of us would be here right now. But if we were given what we deem to be fair, you brought up the disgraced ex-president. I can't say his name, or else I have to sage my room, and I don't have any sage at the moment, and I'm broke, so I can't go buy some. But can you imagine if those same jackboot like Gestapo people that stormed the Capitol. They stormed it because they thought the election was stolen from them, and really the broader macro scale was they felt like their whiteness was being questioned. Their whiteness was kind of being played with a little bit, right? Their privilege. And can you imagine if LGBTQIA people, right, people who their marriage rights have been infringed upon and different things like that because of their sexual orientation or because of their gender identity, people who are indigenous, First Nation people, people who are African American, whose ancestors were stolen, brought here and forced to work this land and murdered for over it. Can you imagine the pushback that you would get from that same group of people on the government? So that's why I say, like, I'm not even sure when we really talk about it, when and if this bill, HR 40, passes and they start to form a commission just to have these same discussions that we're having right now. Good luck coming up with your reparations package, because that's going to be quite something. I'm not sure that it's something that would be ever easy to get that 80% to come to our side a little bit more, and even the playing field on that. What do you call it? A seesaw? Yeah. On the seesaw. I don't think that that's going to be easily done, given the history of racism in this country and the way that it governs itself, right? So I just want to mention that. For me, I think the most, going back to my initial question, like, what do we actually see as being something that could happen, that wouldn't take years and years and years to debate and getting through loopholes? And for me, just acknowledge what y'all have done. Stop. And my thing too is leave us alone. Leave us alone. Let our kids learn about Black history. Stop touching it. Let people teach critical race theory. Just leave us alone. Let us do us and stop killing us. Stop coming into our communities when we're successful and we've, made a way for ourselves and burning it down. Just leave us alone and acknowledge the fact that y'all are wrong. Start right there. Start with that. Because all of that other stuff, it's going to take decades and probably even centuries, if we're being very serious about it, for that, like I said, reparations package to ever come to pass. And the other thing that I want, if we're talking about going around the circle, is I would also like to see this commission discuss, like, free genealogy kits be given out to every single person with, who identifies as African American and whose ancestors were stolen and brought here as enslaved people. I would love that, because for me, a big piece of everything that I do, it all begins with the self, right? Understanding who you are to go out and to change the world. And so many of us, again, our histories were never recorded. We don't know our ancestors' names. We don't know where they slaved, or where they died. And so to be able to have the government open their pockets up and pay for us to at least take the first steps to try to figure some of that out, I think that that's, again, very ground-based level. Don't tell me you can't do it. You absolutely can.
Yeah, especially the acknowledgement piece, like that. So me personally, I don't need that. I already know, right? I've done my research. I've read what I needed to read. Like, I know what they've done, right? So I don't need the acknowledgement. But at the very base, the ground level, that's one thing that the government could do, no cost, right? Is just come out and say, hey, this is the history of America. This is how America was really founded. And that might open a lot of eyes to a lot of people, right? So I get it. At the base level, can be done. I don't really need that. I don't really need that.
You're saying sorry, but you're not telling me why you're sorry. Like, here, sorry, take this. Well, why are you sorry? Tell me why. Yeah. Acknowledge that you did me wrong. But that's where I come from with it. But I get you.
And I get it, right? And for some people that that holds a lot of meaning. And I'm not trying to take that meaningfulness from the acknowledgement away from you. A lot of people who are oppressed, they just want their oppressor to be like, you know what? I'm wrong as fuck. I understand what I'm doing and the impact of my actions on you.
And then stop doing it.
And then stop doing it. And actually mean it when you say, I'm sorry, right? Yeah. I get it. And I guess to David's point, I'm not as optimistic about this country as maybe a lot of other people. I'm more realistic. I'm not pessimistic, right? I see the opportunities. I see that there are avenues to improvements and ways that we can improve. And I think that we can work towards those and start exploring these avenues. I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be without a fight. It's not going to be without a lot of hassle. And it's not going to be without a lot of us, doing the legwork for generations after us to benefit from. I don't think that this is going to be something that we see in our lifetimes. And I was looking at, like, one of the questions that you asked, Laurel, is like, what are the things that reparations can actually address, right? The business ownership, the entrepreneurship, but there are things like education that we were stifled from. There are things like, and even once we were allowed into education, the debt that follows that some Black people can only get into schools but by incurring hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, whereas other families are able to pay their kids their way through schools. And that's another thing, just the household income for white families versus Black families. And there's like $150,000 median difference. So they're like, the average white family owns they hold $150,000 more in family income and family wealth than the average Black family. So there's that whole wage gap disparity that that can be addressed in reparations. So there's just a lot of different things that we are impacted with today in society that could be addressed, not just by giving people businesses, not just by giving people land, not just by giving people money, but like giving people ways out of just the systemic oppression that has been put in place because of the financial burdens on us, the educational burdens on us, the political burdens on us. So there's a lot of things that can be addressed with reparations, not just money, not just land, not just business ownership and things like that.
Yeah, maybe we should just make the myth true and just let all Black people go to college for free. I mean, they already think we do anyway now, so I'm like, we might as well just like, you know what I mean? I feel like that's an easy one to get. It's like, y'all already think this. Let's just make it reality. Boom, we all go to school for free.
Because they think we all go to school for free. We're all on welfare. Like, so how are we all broke? If everything that we do is for free, how come we still are not making any income? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's kind of crazy out there.
God, I wish we went to school for free. Oh, man. Anyway, and this is like, so this for me is a genuine question, but because I legit don't know, but I know there was a lot about it when they built the African American Museum in DC, right? And I could be wrong, honestly. I remember Barack giving a speech about it, but was there any acknowledgement then? Because I feel like, how do you build, and I still haven't been to that museum, I need to go, right? I honestly, consciously and subconsciously, I've been avoiding it because I know I've heard people, I've heard from them, they're just like, it's triggering. I was like, I might leave that bitch and be like, you know what? Mm-hmm. I'm about to light a match and burn this whole motherfucking down. So this is legit question. Like, were there any statements that came out when they built that? And that's something I'll probably go and research later if anybody knows, drop in the comments, stuff like that or whatever. But I feel like how do you build that and not say something? Like, it's like, oh, why are you building this? Right? Because we feel like it's important. Why do you feel like it's important? So I feel like there had to be some level of acknowledgement at that point. Probably not as overt as we would like it, but anyway, it was a genuine question when he talked about that. I was like, I wonder what they did with the African American Museum. So, which we should go. I got to go first though, because I got to go first by myself.
Why?
Because I'm not. Nope.
Why?
Because here's what's gonna happen. Like, I'm gonna go through. Like, everybody's already told me. Like, I think, what did they say? Start at the top floor and come down. Because if you like. So that way, like, because I think whatever it is, I think the top floor is the worst. And so they're at least like, you go for the worst and it kind of, otherwise, like, you're going to be coming out and it's just, and so I'm like, I already know, number one, it's going to be triggering. I don't need to go with Laurel because by the time we get out, she's going to be sitting there like, fuck it, let's do it. And then I'm going to be like, you goddamn right. And so I don't need that shit. I need to be able to come out of there and think clearly, you know what I'm saying? And let everything I've just witnessed kind of go through, and then like we could all take a trip. But I know I go for that for the first time with Laurel, like it's gonna be over, man. We're gonna fucking come out, we're gonna burn everything goddamn down. And she's gonna be sitting there ready to fucking go. I'm gonna be all like, nah, I already paid that. Not happening.
I've gone back and forth. My mom's best friend lives in DC and she went to visit her, and they went to the African American Museum together. And she took pictures of the casket that Emmett Till was buried in. She said, you know, there's a lot of interactive experiences, so you can actually go and kneel in front of it like you were at his wake. You know, there's an argument that, you know, people talk about a lot, like, I'm done with Black pain, like, we live it every day, we don't need to. But like, I'll always tell people, you have to know, you gotta feel it. You have to feel it. You have to feel it. Like I'm waiting for the day. I use ancestry.com and I search around and I try to find stuff about my family history. The day that I find where, you know, my family lived, what plantation they were on, if that, even if it's not still a plantation, but just to find that place and just step foot on that land, it's like, it could radicalize you in a way. It definitely would for me. But more than anything, like, just to see it and just, I don't know, it makes it real for you. It makes it so much more real for you, because you can learn about Emmett Till from the docuseries on Hulu or whatever, or, you know, you've heard about slavery, but when you step on a plantation, when you walk into a slave quarter, it gives you this experience that you would have not previously had, where you come to this certain realization about yourself as a Black person, as a descendant of these people, that I think that every African-American person deserves to have. I don't think it could be, again, for different people, could be negative. You may not want to, that's fine, but I think everyone deserves to at least be able to experience, you know, this is who I am. And in a positive way, because your ancestors survived it. They survived it.
Yeah.
And they built wealth from it. And even when they brought in Jim Crow and all these things, they never gave us reparations. They talked about it and keyed and didn't do anything. We're still here. We're still educating ourselves. We're still building businesses. We're trying to, you know, so.
Maybe
what
what it
do
is.
you like museums, or do you just go to football games and waste your time?
Listen, I'm a man of the culture. I love museums. I love history. I love, and just like you said, I love that experiential history where you can go step foot and kind of experience things as they were back then. And I was just about to say, you know, maybe it's one of those things where we do some forced assimilation. And like, if you're a white person, you have to go to the African American Museum. Like, that's part of the reparations. You gotta go. You gotta go by the time you're like 15. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a requirement that you go and you actually see the history that Black, you know, your neighbors and your colleagues and your classmates their ancestors had to live through, and why there's so much tension between, you know, the, you know, white adults and the Black adults that, you know, you've seen navigating in society. So I mean, I say that in jest, but I think it would be beneficial that, you know, a real honest and unapologetic look at how African Americans were treated in history needs to be taught in schools. Maybe not elementary school, but, you know, late middle school, early high school for sure. And don't do one of those things where it's like an elective. Like, it has to be taught. It has to be a graduation requirement that you understand African American and indigenous people's history in this country. Like, you have to, and kind of make that a requirement. And that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to get that 80%, you know, to move along that seesaw on just that one issue, right? So all of the other issues that we were talking about, it's just, it's going to be less and less people, that more issues that we bring to the table are going to be less appealing to the people that we need them to appeal to.
Yeah. And I would think it's, you know, I would definitely make sure that you need to see the real truth of how African Americans are treated. Like, but then I would also continue with the pattern. Like, you need to see there's a real pattern of this country, because African Americans are the worst. We've done it to Asians. We've done it to indigenous. Like, it is a very sad pattern that this country has done. Right. And that needs to be, I would take that. If that was a compromise, they said, look, we will make it a requirement that we will actually show a real history, what we know of what actually happened. And then they compromised, said, we'll show it for all of them. Like, I would take that. And the reason why is because, you know, to your point, Maine, like, I get softer as I get older, man. I couldn't do it to the babies. Not elementary. That's just let the babies be babies. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, let them run around. Like, I don't know if I could deal with seeing like an 8 or 9-year-old come home after seeing some shit like that. Like that's a lot. But like middle school-ish, somewhere around there. And the reason why I say that is because we don't know like what it would do, but I think it would give some real somberness and reality to them at that age, that they would be able to look across and say, some people would probably lean into whatever they could, but I think I hope, I'm not gonna say I hope that a majority would look at that and go, we can't keep doing this, and they would see like and have an understanding of, okay, like I understand why you may look at my parents a certain way or this, that, or whatever, like, and it drives some conversations between them. And the reason why I say I have hope is because I watch my nephews grow up, right? And there was a beauty to it. Is like they had this very, and to this day he still has them, this very diverse group of friends that grew up together, they play football together, they went to school together, and it's not just it's boys, it's girls, it's all of them. Like, and I mean, it's all colors of the rainbow, right? And they truly like, they talk about it, right? They laugh about it and make some jokes or whatever, but they talked about it, but they talked about their differences, but they still were able to have like this connection between all of them and kind of grow up together. They just had this beautiful event over the summer for Father's Day, right? Because they're all grown now, they're all fathers, and they all came to the park, they all brought their kids, right? And it's these, it's Black fathers, Mexican fathers, white fathers, all of them, right? And they're just there with their kids and talking about it, and they're having their kids come together. I'm like, man, that there's something to that, right? And all of the wrong and all the explosives and all the emotion, right? There is also this thing when we truly just see each other for human beings, right? That it is possible, right? And that for me probably keeps me from burning all of this shit down, is when I have those images and have those thoughts. And I was like, so Martin's dream it's not necessarily just a dream. It is possible, right? Even in small glimpses here and there. So I was like, okay, I won't burn it down, because they deserve an opportunity to actually live in that life, right? Even though there's days where I'm just like, fuck this shit. But it's possible. So I would like, that's something I would accept as a compromise, right? Because I would hope that those kids coming out there, and they would go into the worlds of adults, and just they would look at it differently, right? It wouldn't just be some ignorance and blind hatred. Like, they would have seen everything, and maybe when they would start to see things happening again that starts to look like what they've read about or what they've seen or what they talked about, they'd be like, hey, we're not going to do this, right? And right. Maybe we would get some of that true allyism, where they would jump up and be like, no, fuck that, I'm not, you're not doing that to my friend or this person, because like, I know that that's wrong, right? Some of this is rooted in true absolute ignorance. They have no fucking clue. Mm-hmm. Like they and because of all the reasons that we'll especially, I can't wait for the CRT talk, like, that we'll get into, like, it's never been exposed to them, right? And so that to me is like the true ignorance. Like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And sometimes it's shown to them too late. And now they're like, oh man, I get it. And they feel bad. But it's like, nah, we need you to more than feel bad. Like, we need you to feel bad and pick up the goddamn stick. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, come on, grab it and come on, right? And I don't know, maybe if it's done a little bit earlier, they'll be like, yeah, I am gonna pick up a stick because I saw this and I know what it is.
Yeah, and I think, and the reason why I say the middle school age, maybe early high school age, is because, like, in elementary school, you don't really see like cliques, right? Especially if you're in a diverse community, you don't really see cliques in elementary school. Like, kids are just, they see other kids. Maybe you see girls and boys, but kids are just playing with other kids, right? And it's not until they're like 10, 11, 12 years old where, like, the influences of their families, and then you got the cliques that start forming, and you got the urban kids, the poor kids, the prep kids, the goth kids. Like, that's when you start seeing those cliques forming, right? Is in middle school. And so that is the age where kids are starting to actually form those self identities. And so that's the age where I think it's appropriate to start saying, all right, so these are the things that are affecting the people who you don't identify with. And this is why you need to be open-minded, and you need to understand the history and the culture behind all of these other people, because that's the age where you kind of start to build your own identity.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I think that would be the appropriate age. And I'm like you, Dave, like, we got to protect the babies, man. When the babies are just being babies and they're just living life, okay, I don't, that's not the problem, right? It's the problem. The problem comes in where they start internalizing what culture is feeding to them. And so that's why I think, at that age is when you need to start feeding them the most important shit.
Right. I agree. I think that with the babies piece of it, and again, I speak very lightly on this because I don't have children like y'all do. So I take a seat back, right? Because I understand I haven't had that experience. But from what I can tell you based on my knowledge, right, is that we know statistically, we've seen it, that Black kids, doesn't matter really how old they are, but most often it's all dependent on size a lot of the time, right? So if you're a big Black, if you're 4 years old and you're tall, right, then now you may run into problems with, officers in schools, what do they call them, SROs, student resource officers in schools, and different things like that. Like, I remember being an undergrad and studying, watching the footage and writing, papers on kids like 5 years old, Black boys throwing temper tantrums just like every other kid and getting handcuffed. So should a child that age, right, be brought into the African American Museum, Smithsonian, DC, and see those kind of images? Probably not, because they wouldn't understand it, and it would probably cause more harm, just be scary, or they just wouldn't know what's going on. Right. But I do think that at the very minimum, parents need to be preparing their babies before they get exposed to school systems and things like that, of the reality that they are Black and what that means, or you are Black and you are tall, or you are a dark-skinned Black child, right? All of those little nuances that get into it, and discussing that with them so that they know, because at the end of the day, white people are out here killing our babies anyways, or putting these different societal norms that are literally whitewashing the way that they see themselves and the way that they view society from the time that as soon as they can get their hands on them, they're doing it. So we have to also prepare them for that. But yeah, violent images and things like I said, I go back and forth with that. For me, it pumps me up. I don't mind it, right? But for other people, it really just causes harm and just kind of like, what am I doing, right? So it's important to be conscious of that, especially with children.
So
did I get it right? Am I going to be a good mom one day? I thought that was pretty good.
There's no hint. You make it up as you go along, like literally.
Yeah,
right. All of us parents are just out here winging it, man.
Yeah.
We're all winging it. But I was gonna say, since we're actually over an hour right now, so we're about to wrap it up. I just kind of wanted to get you guys' input and summarize. So what do we actually think reparations should look like? So what are the next steps that we need to take? And I know we mentioned things like businesses, so maybe not giving businesses, but business grants, maybe business loans, being able to expand businesses, things like that. Maybe that's the reality. Yeah. Financial compensation, educational compensation. What else would reparations look like?
For me, I would say this. Yeah, I start up with the businesses. That's my nirvana. That would be great. But reality, I think it's. So I tie it back to what did land mean back then, right? And what's the equivalent to that now, right? So let's find pathways and use that to, economically empower this group of individuals. So whether it's tax credits, business loan grants, right? Hell, loan forgiveness, things of that nature, right? I would look at something like that. What's the package that we can do that says, all right, there are things in this system that systemically we can look at and know that is going to disadvantage. So let's as part of our reparations, let's permanently fix is probably too much, but let's find a path, right? To me, it's a thing of like, for the next 10 years, we're going to do this, right? Let's get grants, let's do this to kind of help even that playing field to give you what the equivalent of 40 acres would have been back then, your ability to really compete in the capital market in the society. To me, that's what I would kind of go towards. But yeah, I'm business and finance minded.
So what about you, Laurel? In addition to the things that we've discussed so far today, do you see any other necessary inclusions for what reparations should look like?
Yeah, I think that for me, it all begins with accountability and acknowledgement. Because as I brought up with the historical examples of reparations that have been given, I need white supremacy to be abolished. That's what I need before you can even begin to talk to me about what reparations you're going to give me. Because as we've seen with indigenous people here and with different communities of color throughout the states that have been awarded reparations in the past, because white supremacy is the main rule of law, and it's just like I always give the analogy of like poison in a cake, or like a bad ingredient. Might look good, but it's bad. It doesn't taste good, and you might get sick. So it doesn't matter what you give people. Historically, we've seen that, yes, okay, we're going to give you reparations, but then white supremacy always finds a way to weasel its way in and manage to continue to oppress those groups. Whether it means, well, we couldn't get it all together, so I guess this money's just up in the air and we need it for this instead because Americans are complaining about wartime or something else that the government finds a reason to avoid giving African Americans, indigenous people, minority groups their just due. And again, I encourage people to think about what does that mean? What is their just due? What is that? Again, for me, and I've brought it up a lot, I keep saying indigenous people because for me, reparations all begin with them. If they're not at the forefront of the conversation, I'm sitting down and shutting up because this is their, you know what, their land. This is their stuff. So while my ancestors and y'all's ancestors were stolen and brought here and we were made to slave over and we created things, and yes, we did, and I'm not minimizing any of that. I'm not playing oppression Olympics, but what I'm saying is that at the very minimum, we have to acknowledge the land theft and genocide that occurred on this country. Then talk to me about silencing me with money, because to me, that's really what reparations. That's what it's going to end up being. That's what it's going to end up being. Just take this money, Black people, go do what you do with it. I don't care. You're going to end up putting it back into white communities anyways, and then don't talk to me about it again. That's how I see it. Like I said, America doesn't have
the great American bribe, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate you guys' input on this topic. This is a real tough one, because no one really knows what to even bring to the table and what will propel the conversation forward. So in echoing what you said, Laurel, I think like everyone needs to kind of think about what matters to them and what reparations should look like for their families, for their communities, and for the betterment of the nation. Because if it doesn't improve the nation, then the discussion is not going to get anywhere.
Right.
All right. I know we've been doing this for a few weeks, but you want to take us out, Laurel? You want to close us out today?
No,
I don't know. You're on the spot.
Don't just bring that on me.
Hey, equal partners.
Y'all see what he's trying to do? He's trying to make you guys not like me as much as the other two. I see what you're doing. No, go ahead, man. Go do what you do. This isn't my thing. This is
my sabotage campaign.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Then you say we're all three equal partners. Hey, I've outroed us. Dave has outroed us. Who hasn't outroed us yet? Our third equal partner. Take us out, Laurel. Let's go.
Oh, me? I'm about to come through the screen first. No, you're the one that got it all down. Do it. Stop.
I'll take us out. So before I wrap this up, do either of you guys have any final words that you want to say?
No, I'm good, bro. You got it.
Yeah, I'm bringing the spotlight every week.
That's what I wanted to say. I feel attacked.
I'm bringing the spotlight every week. Every week. You demanded your flowers. I'm bringing the heat. All right, guys. Well, no, seriously, on a serious note, I appreciate you guys' insightful discussion on topics like this. I do love the theme that we've kind of been, the thread that we've kind of been rolling with over the last few weeks regarding, hey, these are the things that we as a culture need to discuss and bring to the table so that we can prepare our future generations on how to navigate this thing called the American life. So this was our discussion on reparations and what the reality of what reparations in this country could look like. If you guys want to discuss, if you want to bring other topics to the table, feel free to hit us up. We are on TikTok, on the Corner Media Group. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, at Ebony Ascent. Like, share, subscribe, interact with us. And you can always find us on our web platform, www.ebonyascent.com. Come there. Hey, subscribe so that you can stay in the know on all the topics that we bring up throughout all of our platforms, all of our podcasts. discussions, because we bring stuff for the military folks, we bring stuff for the veterans, we bring stuff for the mental health folks, and then we bring stuff for the IT and the money, the business entrepreneurial folks. Like we got a lot of information available on ebonyascent.com. So come check us out, subscribe, and be in the email chain so that you know every time we drop some new hotness. So till the next cocktail, till the next conversations, we out here.
Y'all stay safe out there.